I first wanted to start by thanking the Prime Minister of India for being here today and kicking off this important summit. And I also wanted to thank Dr. Pachauri for his kind and gracious invitation. There are times when political differences are understandable. When either side of an issue has some merit and the discussion to find common ground brings clarity, brings people together, even enlightens, and in the end, it produces better public policy. But that is not the case with the debate surrounding climate change. Those who deny climate change, who deny the need to act, who deny the potentially disastrous course on which we are set, this debate and discourse does not bring clarity or enlighten. And the confusion it injects does more than just delay a solution. It propels us closer and closer to a tipping point. When there is no action that can reverse the dominoes we will have set in motion. But the problem is, at least in the United States, we don't do well with big ideas that need big solutions. Although President Obama is trying, and I'm an optimist and believe he will succeed. We are much more comfortable, usually, with incremental change, like topics we can get our arms around. But something that is this global, that requires global action, agreement from the entire world community, that's way outside our comfort zone typically. Take the just completed election in the United States that saw President Barack Obama reelected. Climate change was not really a big part of that debate. Arguably, that election, and most of the others being contested during this time of global recession, find themselves more focused on the economy, and that is understandable. But oftentimes, even the economic discourse in those campaigns don't really engage the big issues. We hear small talk and sound bites, but not big ideas about the kinds of structural changes and reform needed to bring a correction to the problems and difficulties that have been generations and decades, even centuries in the making. That's not the kind of change that politics and politicians do well. But that's exactly the kind of situations we faced more and more often as a global community. And we need to find ways to tackle these problems together, because the world is becoming more and more interrelated and interdependent. And that means more and more we need common action, agreement, and cooperation to make the changes we need. And that also means we need leaders, and the United States is one of those nations that must lead, especially on an issue we are considering today, climate change. But in many ways, the U.S. has fumbled the ball on climate change. But that too can change. Our public debate on it is still without consensus. Just months ago, in our national election, there were respected voices still uncertain about the validity of climate change, still suggesting that it was a conspiracy of the ecological left, still claiming that it was at worst exaggerated and something we could deal with in time, but that the urgency was fabricated. Good thing these same people were not on the deck of the Titanic, or there would have been no survivors. The problem is real. The problem is urgent. And the problem requires our best minds, our immediate attention, and our concerted action. And so from my first day as governor of Florida, I decided to make climate change a top priority issue. In my inaugural address in 2007, I put climate change front and center, wanting to raise its issue profile and at the same time sending the signal that I was serious about implementing concrete, real ways to start change and put Florida on a path to sustainability. I was told by some of my advisors that it was a risk as a Republican governor, a newly elected Republican governor, I might add, making his first speech as governor, to make this a priority. To me, the greater risk was not making it a priority. And so the speech was seen by some as controversial, a challenge of sorts, that I was not going to be satisfied by the often too cozy relationship between business and special interests, elected officials and government regulators. I knew the status quo was not and is not sustainable. I knew public debt was not the only thing we were passing on to our children. What was the point of being elected to lead a state with more than 1,200 miles of coastline, where a majority of its citizens live near that coastline? A state more vulnerable to rising ocean levels and violent weather patterns than any other state, and do nothing. So I decided the time of kicking the can down the road was over, that we needed to accept responsibility and act accordingly, and I did. By first doing what no Republican governor of Florida has ever done, simply acknowledge that the problem existed, that it was in fact real. I am persuaded, I said, that global climate change is one of the most important issues that we will face this century. You would have thought that I just said the earth was flat. But I went further. I went on and said, I will bring together the brightest minds to begin working on a plan for Florida to explore groundbreaking technologies and strategies that will place our state at the forefront of a growing worldwide movement to reduce greenhouse gases. Florida will provide not only the policy and technology advances, but the moral leadership, the political will, if you will, to allow us to overcome this monumental challenge. To me, it seemed like a win-win-win situation for Florida. And as governor, 1 win would be great, 3 would be a no-brainer. We could help address global climate change, to promote our state's agriculture and wean our country from its reliance upon foreign oil. My proclamation was not as popular as I would have thought, rather as I would have hoped. But that's the problem with ideological politics. That's the problem with electoral systems where political winners and losers have no relation to the actual problems and solutions that face the electorate. That's a problem with those who resist the importance of science and facts. When you deny the existence of objective truths and instead suggest everything is debatable, everything is open to reconsideration, even proven scientific data and facts, then you're left in a make-believe world in which something someone makes up carries the same merit as something scientifically proven. And frankly, that's a dangerous world. And so while I continued to hear from those people, most of them in my own party, a party of which I am no longer a member, I kept my head down and kept moving forward. 6 months after my inaugural address, undeterred by those critics and the bury our heads in the ground group, I hosted the Serve to Preserve, a Florida Summit on Global Climate Change. It was groundbreaking for Florida, actually for any state and any governor, since the most talk about climate change was just that, it was talk. As we all here know, it can be difficult to reach consensus. It can be a challenge to find actual implementable steps to move toward and make progress. But that's exactly what we sought to do at our summit. We brought together leaders of business, government, science, and advocacy to examine the risks of global climate change to Florida and the nation, and to explore the business opportunities that can come from an aggressive response to that change. After 2 days of direct debate and discussion, I concluded the summit by signing 3 executive orders, 2 international partnership agreements. I went into that summit determined that the outcome would be action. I wanted to send a clear signal that we weren't going to be content just to kick this around. We were going to add Florida to the short list of states actively working to address global climate change. We directed our state government to lead by example, to quantify its operational emissions and meet specific reduction targets. We required the state to put in place a range of greenhouse gas emission reduction efforts in state government facilities, including our state vehicle fleet. And we decided to use the state's combined purchasing power to promote energy efficiency and reduced emissions. These were all important steps, things that I, by executive order, could do, also things that could be undone by another's executive order. It's important that we keep moving forward, that we stay focused on the task at hand that we're here about today. We were able to follow up on these executive orders with other important steps, like increasing the energy efficiency standards and building codes. But there were plenty of other things we were unable to accomplish. And so we must remain diligent in our efforts to not only retain our gains, but also to insist that climate change find a prominent place in public debate. If we are able to have critical elections around the world, hard-fought and highly contested elections that will determine the future agenda of nations for decades to come, and if climate change is not a primary topic in these elections, then climate change will not be a primary agenda item for these nations. There is a public relations battle that we just win before many of the political battles can be fought and won. As a former governor, I can tell you that the other side is good at moving the discussion past the issue. All too often it works. And so that is our challenge, not just to win the political policy battle, but also the public relations one. Its impact is real, and it can help enable like-minded leaders to act and move things forward. While I was governor, we took many important steps, but we need to do more. And to do more, it takes all of us working together. Thank you very much.